Guys, in this video, we're going to be going over the top 5 paid solutions for treating and reversing your hair loss in 2020. Some of these 5 you may know already, but some of them may surprise you. Make sure to watch all 5. Hey guys, Leon here from HairGod.com, where people who are worried about their hair loss go to regrow their hair. Now, just before we get into the top 5 paid solutions to stopping hair loss, do make sure to click the link in the description to get access to the hair nutrition plan. You get 21 delicious recipes designed specifically for faster, stronger hair growth. The meals are loaded with nutrients like biotin, zinc, and collagen to make hair as thick and strong as possible. Now, without any further delay, let's get into it. At number 1, we've got the hair transplant. If you have around $10,000 to $15,000 to spend, then the transplant might be the answer for you. However, there's one very important caveat when it comes to transplants, but I'll come to that in a minute. So the way transplants work is by rearranging the follicles on your head. They take follicles from the back of the head, the so-called donor area, and they transplant them to the front of the head, wherever it's balding. In doing so, a hair transplant basically recreates a new hairline. So they turn back the clock and restore your hairline to what it was before. There are limits to this process. There are only so many hair follicles that you can remove from the donor area before its density starts to show that it's been lost. So if your hair loss is very far progressed, you will only be able to restore the hairline to a certain extent. Transplants are based on one important principle, and that is that you don't need to restore balding areas to their original density in order to create the impression of fullness. You only need a fraction of the original density. This can be as low as 50%, sometimes even lower. Now, there are 2 types of hair transplants: follicular unit transplantation, which most people just refer to as strip excision, and follicular unit extraction, or FUE. Strip excision works by removing an entire strip of hair from the donor area. The strip is then dissected under the microscope into so-called follicular units. You see, hairs don't usually grow in isolation. They appear in bunches of 2, 3, or 4 hairs, though sometimes you can also get singular hair units. These are called follicular units. And in strip excision, these follicular units are transplanted, one by one, onto the bald areas that you want to cover up. Special care must be taken when recreating the hairline, because it has to be made up of single unit hairs, not the coarse multi-haired follicular units that you find behind the hairline. It must also have a natural wavy or zigzag appearance to it. It mustn't be a completely straight line, which will just look fake. The second major type of hair transplant is follicular unit extraction, or FUE. This is basically the same as strip excision when it comes to how the follicular units are inserted back into the balding scalp, and namely that happens one by one. But the difference lies in how the follicular units are extracted from the back of the head. Rather than making a strip and dissecting it under a microscope, in FUE, the surgeon will make hundreds of tiny punches into the donor area, and then directly move the follicular units one by one. This will then be prepared before being transplanted, exactly like in strip excision. So hair transplants are a fantastic solution, if you can afford them, and if you are lucky to get a competent surgeon who will give you a naturally looking result. The one problem with a transplant, apart from the cost, is having it too early, and in particular before your hair loss has stabilized. There is a common misconception that transplanted hair is immune to falling back out again, but this is simply not true. Some transplanted hairs won't survive in the short term, in the aftermath of the transplant. But if the underlying hair loss isn't stabilized, then many of the transplanted hairs might also fall out gradually over the years. Another possibility is that the transplanted hair won't fall out, but you'll keep on losing the rest of your hair, in which case you can end up with a very unusual pattern of baldness, where you have more hair in the front rather than further back. So how can you stabilize your hair loss before having the transplant? Well guys, that's exactly where the other 5 paid solutions come into play. At number 2, we've got the FDA approved medications. So the most common ways in which men today try to stabilize their pattern hair loss is by using one of the 2 FDA approved medications. Let's explore both of these now. The first is minoxidil. This was the very first anti-baldness drug to be approved all the way back in 1988. Its brand name is Rogaine, and it continues to be the most popular over-the-counter medication for hair loss to this day. Minoxidil is applied topically in one of 2 versions. The original version was a liquid solution that was applied onto the scalp with a dripper. But A few years later, the mousse version came out. You spray the mousse onto your hands and then you rub it into your scalp. Now, regardless of which version that you use, you're meant to apply it twice daily. Still, most users find the mousse superior to the liquid solution, in the sense that it's easier to use, less messy, and produces fewer side effects. Minoxidil is thought to work by dilating the vessels in the scalp, which increases the blood flow. Increased blood flow means better oxygenation and an adequate supply of nutrients to support the function of the hair follicles. Results take 3 to 4 months of daily use to show. But the problem is that around only 1 out of 2 users will see these kind of results. The rest will actually see no visible regrowth whatsoever. For those that do respond positively, minoxidil will produce regrowth in thinning areas only. Once a part of the scalp has gone completely bald, minoxidil cannot regrow any hair. So you can't take minoxidil to restore your hairline. It just won't work. Side effects are generally mild. Topical reactions like irritation, itchiness, and redness. One group of users who should definitely consult with their doctor prior to treatment are those with heart problems, because minoxidil can sometimes cause cardiac side effects, most notably an increased or irregular heartbeat. The second FDA-approved medication for male hair loss is finasteride. Finasteride hit the market a few years after minoxidil in 1997. It's sold under the brand name Propecia. Like minoxidil, the patent has now expired, meaning that you can get generic versions at a lower cost. It works by blocking the male hormone called dihydrotestosterone, or DHT. This is the hormone believed to be directly responsible for hair loss. Finasteride has 2 major advantages compared to minoxidil. Firstly, it's an oral medication, which means that you don't mess about with the liquid solutions or those mousse canisters. You just simply pop your finasteride pill once a day and then go about your daily routine. For this reason, finasteride users tend to stick to the treatment for far longer than those on minoxidil. Its second major advantage is that it straight up works better than minoxidil. It's more effective both at stopping hair loss as well as growing out new hair. This doesn't mean that you won't find men who didn't respond to finasteride and then responded marvelously when they started minoxidil. There are no doubt many such examples. But statistically speaking, you're just more likely to respond better to finasteride. Now, just like with minoxidil, once a part of the head has gone completely bald, finasteride can do nothing. The big disadvantage of finasteride is the side effects, which are sexual in nature. The 2 most common ones are impotence and the loss of sexual desire. Estimates vary, but they're said to affect between 2 to 7% of users. In some rare cases, these symptoms persist even after the drug is continued. This is called post-finasteride syndrome. So, how much will these medications set you back? Well, a monthly supply of brand name Rogaine is about $40. Propecia will cost you more at about $70 per month. So we can do the math to see how much this will cost over, say, a 20-year period. Bear in mind that both of these medications are designed to be stayed on for life. If you stop any of these medications, you will not keep any gains that you made. Therefore, Rogaine works out at around $9,500 and Propecia just shy of $17,000. So after all is said and done, you're basically talking transplant kind of money, but obviously with nowhere near the same kind of results. The third solution is electrotrichogenesis. So first things first, what is electrotrichogenesis? The name itself is a combination of 3 Greek words. Electro for electricity, tricho for hair, and genesis for birth. So electrotrichogenesis, or ETG for short, is about using electricity to stimulate the growth of new hairs. The electricity is very low in intensity, low enough that you can't even feel it, let alone suffer any damage. Now, we don't understand exactly how ETG works on the biochemical level. What we do know is that its results are probably due to an alteration of the hair growth cycle. As you might know, the hallmark of male pattern baldness is that the follicles sprout progressively shorter and thinner hairs. This is partly because the resting phase of their hair cycle is extended relative to the growth phase. During the resting phase, the hair shaft stops growing and just sits there until it falls off. So the hair literally has a shorter amount of time to grow before falling off again. The end result is shorter, thinner hair. ETG works by restoring the hair follicle's natural growth cycle so that the hair shaft has a sufficient amount of time to grow and give rise to a full-bodied terminal hair. The end result is thicker, longer hair with increased scalp coverage. And what we do know from the published research is that ETG can give pretty impressive results. For example, this study out of Canada found that 29 out of 30 men with pattern baldness were able to stabilize their hair loss or regrow some hair. And the average regrowth after 8 months was on the order of 66% in the thinning areas. Following these very encouraging results, the study was extended for another 7 months. And the hair counts continued to rise, eventually going from an average of 82 hairs to an astonishing 276 hairs at the end of the extension period. Now, when it comes to ETG treatments, you have 2 options. You could either have them done at a clinic by professionals, or you can do them yourself with a device intended for home use. Now, I'm not even going to tell you how much the clinic visits will add up to over the years. The grand total will completely vary depending on how much the clinic charges per visit and how often they recommend that you have the treatment. But when all is said and done, it will certainly cost you more than a hair transplant over a couple of decades. The rational, affordable way to go about this is to purchase your own device and use it at home. Depending on the quality, one of these devices will set you back a few hundred or maybe $1,000. The advantage of using a home device is that it's a one-off cost instead of ongoing outlay. Being that the devices are relatively simple, they're also very unlikely to break down or require maintenance. And there are no side effects of ETG and no counterindications. It's about as safe a treatment as they come. The disadvantage of ETG is that it will require some investment of time. You will need to repeat the treatment multiple times a week, and each session does take a few minutes. If you are interested in this kind of technology, you can check out a device known as a grow comb. I've linked to the HairGuard grow comb in the description below, and over there you can check out some of the reviews and the before and after pictures of using one. We do know that a lot of the viewers of the channel have already invested in grow combs, so let us know how you're getting on in the comments below. Oh, and one thing to mention, the HairGuard grow comb comes with a 365-day money-back guarantee, so it's entirely risk-free to try. And number 4, guys, we've got Botox. Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. Botox? Really? That stuff is for wrinkles, no? Well, you're right, its most popular use certainly is for treating wrinkles. But fundamentally, what Botox does is relax the muscles. It does this by blocking the signals from the nerves, the result being that the muscles can no longer contract. And as a side result of this, is the tension in the muscles is relieved, which is why in recent years we've been seeing more and more studies on its potential for treating tension headaches. So, predictably, if you inject Botox into the scalp, you relieve the tension there. And as we've explained in many other videos, there is a good reason to believe that tension in the scalp is a fundamental process driving pattern hair loss. Let me show you what I mean. On the left-hand side of this graphic, you can see the distribution of tension the scalp. The tension is caused by the muscles on the back and front of the head, compressing and stretching a layer of the scalp that covers the top of the head. The areas in light blue are those with the highest tension. Those in darker blue have progressively lower levels of tension. It looks pretty familiar, right? Well, you'll quickly understand why it looks so familiar by reviewing the image on the right. It's a graphical representation of the Hamilton-Norwood scale. The areas in green are the ones to go bald first, followed by those in light blue, and finally those in dark blue. The correspondence between the two graphs is so tight that it is practically impossible to be a coincidence. As you might have guessed, the key to reversing hair loss is relieving this tension. And this is where Botox comes into play. A groundbreaking study that was published in 2010 found that just 2 Botox sessions spaced 24 weeks apart were enough to produce regrowth in 75% of balding men. The hair regrowth observed was on par with what you'd get from daily finasteride treatment. From left to right, you can see here the before and after photos of some men who participated in this study. The researchers concluded that Botox achieves these results by loosening the scalp, which reduces pressure on the blood vessels that supply it. The result is increased blood and oxygenation. A follow-up study in China published a few years later gave very similar results. The big advantage of Botox is the minimal time investment that it requires. You just schedule an appointment with your doctor once every few months, you have your Botox, and then you go on with your life. The obvious disadvantage of the Botox is the cost. A single Botox session will set you back a few $100s at least. Depending on where you have it, it could well be over $1,000 for a single session. Because treatments are charged by the number of Botox units used, and to relieve the scalp tension, you will need a lot of units. Far more than you would for your standard wrinkle treatments. And you'll have to repeat this expenditure every few months. Over the course of say 20 years, and assuming that you have the Botox once every 6 months, you're looking at the cost of multiple hair transplants. probably upwards of $40,000 to $50,000. Another potential problem is that you'll need to find a doctor who performs the Botox procedure specifically for hair loss. And at this point, at least to the best of our knowledge, Botox for hair loss isn't very widely known or used. Guys, the fifth thing that we're going to look at are Growbands. Given the cost that we were just discussing, Botox isn't going to be a viable option for many of our viewers. So the obvious question is, do we have another way of relieving the tension in our scalp and reversing our hair loss? And the answer is yes, we do. The simplest way to do this is through daily scalp massages. There's two basic ways that you can do a scalp massage. You can use your hands and administer your massage to yourself. This is a completely free solution, and we have covered scalp massage in another video, which I'll link you to in the description below. The other way is to use a device called a Growband. Growbands are devices that push the scalp together, causing creases, essentially massaging itself. Unlike Botox, Growbands are a one-time investment, so when you invest in one, you own it for life. They're also simple, easy, and enjoyable to use, unlike scalp massages, which can be very tiresome. Growbands also remove the hard work, so users are more likely to stick with the treatment for the long term, potentially giving better results. Many users of the Growband have said that their hair loss has stabilized, and it's definitely worth doing your own research on these devices. We've linked to our HairGuard Growband in the description below, which comes with a 365-day money-back guarantee, so it's entirely risk-free to try. Guys, if you click the videos on the screen now, you can learn more about Will's 8 steps that he used to reverse his hair loss, as well as a video that we made on scalp massage.